Times' David Woode followed officers in South London on an operation to tackle the rising violence. It led to 81 arrests, 145 searches and 12 weapon seizures in just 6 days. David is here now. Now, David, that sounds like a very successful operation. Would the Met put it that way?
I'm sure they would, and it's also, I'm keen to stress that they haven't collated all the data. So we had activity on Sunday. Obviously, I had to file my story Sunday late afternoon. So there's 1 day of activity that still hasn't been accounted for. So I suspect that figure, or those figures that you reference, will rise.
Can you put into context for us what the problem of gang violence is like at the moment?
It's nuanced. It's also quite complex. I think I had noticed a rise in incidents, non-fatal shootings. There were a couple of murders which stuck out to me. You look at the age of the suspects, the locations. And so I'd been speaking to people within police just to find out what was going on. And it was by coincidence when I put a few calls in, someone came back to me and said, look, we're going to be doing a week of activity to try and tackle this surge in gangland tensions and street-based violence. And so I joined the officers on Thursday with myself and Richard Pole, staff photographer at the Times. And it was an opportunity to go behind the scenes and join officers on the ground. We joined firearms officers at a briefing, and we went on 2 deployments around Lambeth and Southwark. And that's key because there have been 10 homicides reported between January the 1st and June the 30th. Now, that's almost 20% of the 55 killings across the capital. So something's going on. And so I think for me, one of the most illuminating parts of that deployment was we went with 2 officers, a detective constable and a detective sergeant, who work on offender management and the proactive disruptions team. And we drove around Lambeth, and we were, our attention was drawn to vigils and memorials for dead young men. And, it was explained to me the kind of the development and the evolution of the street gangs in the area and who has alliances with whom and, which gang runs this particular area and, who's got the strongest reputation and who's been responsible, for X number of incidents. And I think for me, when we were in Brixton, I was on the corner right by Brixton Village. And, many of our readers, who live in London, will know it's a place where a lot of people, young professionals, can go to drink, shop, eat in cult restaurants.
Yeah, it's zhuzhy, isn't it, David?
Yeah. And it was post-work drinks. And I looked to my right, and there was all this police activity. A man who was believed to be riding a stolen moped was alleged to have been found with Class A, Class B drugs, and he allegedly tried to attack a police officer with a crowbar. And there was all this activity, deafening sirens, and for me, it was story of London. You've got 2 contrasting scenes where you've got gang activities kind of bubbling under the surface, and when it erupts at street level, doesn't really garner much attention.
Somebody might look up from their Aperol Spritz, but they don't have to stay with the story. That's the point, isn't it? So can you extrapolate from what you've seen and from those figures what it is that's happening now that has led to this increase in violence? Is it simply more gangs, or is it the gangs becoming more aggressive towards each other? What's going on there?
So I asked this to the borough commander, and she quite frankly said it's hard to pinpoint. They look at, I'm sure they have all the intelligence, and they've got proactive neighbourhood teams, and you've got firearms teams who are all across it. But we know as reporters that there has been an increase in the severity of the violence. It's worth saying, I'm keen to stress that guns on our streets, frankly, are quite rare. And there's been so many horrendous incidents that have happened in the past 10, 20, 30 years, I think the one that always sticks out to my mind is Dunblane. When I was a kid at the time, and since becoming a crime reporter and reading up on how laws have been tightened for the regulation of firearms, frankly, it's really rare for guns to be fired on the streets. But there are concerns, and I spoke to a gang expert about this, about the number of imitation firearms that are in circulation that can easily be converted into deadly weapons. And this person said to me, if a gang's got money in the bank and they've got beef with another gang, all they've got to do is get hold of a firearm and pay a hitter to carry out their attack. And that expert said that they're seeing children as young as 15 carrying weapons, carrying firearms. And when I was with the officers on Thursday, they described how 3 boys were stopped, one of whom was wanted. One boy had a Rambo knife, allegedly. Another boy allegedly had a combat knife, and another boy allegedly had a loaded Glock, that's a handgun, in his waistband.
Right, and it is a well-known recruitment process for a gang as well, isn't it? To make a very young person handle a weapon that then, if it's used in a crime, makes them culpable for it. It's a kind of a dare almost, isn't it? If you want to join the gang, you've got to do this.
So that's a really interesting point, and I think we can unpack that a little bit, because when I was with the officers, they told me about the recruitment strategy, and it really is a strategy, and the summer holidays is a key time. And the officers were telling me, as the year goes on, you see the same faces re-emerge, and by the following school year, they're fully embedded with the gang. And these new recruits, they're given the nicknames or the titles of new plates. So like commodities, like brand new cars. And they know, and they're educated by these gang elders, and they're expected to pick up the slack and take ownership of a knife should it be found, because they're unlikely to have criminal records. And they're told that the court disposal they're likely to get is a youth referral order.
Right, which can still ruin your life. The recruitment aspect of it, David, though, I mean, I think we can all understand how difficult it would be to leave a gang once you're in it. I mean, if it's operating and running your neighbourhood, it must be so terrifying to even contemplate that. So if you're to prevent kids from getting involved in the first place, what a mammoth task that is. Did you find out much from the police about how they feel they can handle that?
I would say that's where the partnership approach is really key. And so from the point of view from the officers when I was with them on Thursday, they say, look, we try and build relationships with these boys. We try and do these stops and searches, hopefully with intelligence, and one would hope respectfully, to make them see this is what you potentially are facing. But I know we've done a lot of work at the Times. Earlier this year, we did a series on county lines. It's the kind of the strategy of drug distribution around the country. And I had the fortune of meeting a young man who was twice groomed and exploited by drug gangs. And it was when he was caught with wraps of Class A drugs, heroin and crack cocaine, in a trap house in the northwest of England, miles and miles away from his home. When he was facing arrest, he was arrested and charged. That was the catalyst for him to exit. And it was with great fortune he had a referral to a service that no longer is funded by the government, but he was referred to this service, and he worked with an amazing youth worker from St Giles Trust, and I met them both. And he described how this woman, Nikki, would give him little lectures, and she'd tell him, is this what you want from your life? And he said, at first I was ignoring it, but then it started to sink in, and I could see what she was trying to say to me, and I could see the path towards, essentially a life that he can go and put his head down on a pillow and not have to look over his shoulder and sleep well at night. And he's doing really well. But it's that partnership approach of having the police who are out there tackling this on the front line, but also having well-funded, well-resourced youth programs and intervention programs and diversionary initiatives. But also it's making sure that, young people, if they are worried about being stabbed, and if they've been stabbed, that they're going to get the intervention when they go to a hospital or a major trauma centre, but also being helped in education. And there's questions on whether excluding children is beneficial and it's in their best interest, because once they're out of school, that's when gangs can get to them. And we know this.
And surely both of those major players in this whole problem must want the rest of society to actually be a bit better informed about what's happening, because that disconnect where we started our conversation is quite telling, isn't it? A lot of the drugs that these gangs are selling, I mean, they end up with the middle-class people who, go home after a nice night in Brixton, don't they?
Well, we've done a lot of work on this and how the emergence of social media lines. So you've got the county lines, which are the typical kind of traditional method of dealing heroin and crack cocaine, and that's normally to dependent users. But on the other hand, we've seen a growth in the types of social media lines where you've got drug dealers who are, sending blast messages to their contacts with menus, so to speak, offering cocaine, ketamine, cannabis. We've seen Ozempic on these menus. We've seen Zopiclone, Xanax, you name it. And it's those kind of two ecosystems which are kind of at play. But also, I suppose it goes back to what we were talking about when we first started this discussion. It's the two opposing sides. It's how we can all live amongst each other, hopefully free from harm, yet we live in towns and cities where there's essentially towns and cities operating below the surface. And sometimes people know it, sometimes they acknowledge it, but when it erupts and when it's on your doorstep and it becomes hard to ignore, do you engage with it or do you carry on ignoring it?